Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Singapore International Cyber Week 2024. My name is Wayne Chan, and it's my pleasure to be your host this afternoon. Now, we have an exciting lineup of international panelists here with us today to share their perspectives on the theme Insights into 2024's Cyber Threats. We'd like to encourage our audience to pose questions for our panelists through Slido by scanning the QR code as shown on the screen. Now, cyber threats are becoming increasingly sophisticated as threat actors tap on generative AI, also known as Gen AI technology, to conduct their malicious activities. Phishing emails generated using Gen AI are realistic and persuasive. Polymorphic malware created using Gen AI can easily evade detection by traditional antivirus and security solutions. As cyber defenders, Gen AI can be harnessed to enhance cybersecurity operations such as log analytics and investigations. Now, other AI technologies can also be leveraged to improve the effectiveness of existing cybersecurity measures. Now, through this session, we'll be learning how AI can be tapped for cybersecurity operations from our panel of leaders and experts. Our panelists will be sharing their insights and experience on the augmentation of cybersecurity operations using artificial intelligence. And now, without further ado, to provide the keynote on augmentation of cybersecurity operations using artificial intelligence, please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Mr. Phil Venables, Vice President, Technical Infrastructure Security and Chief Information Security Officer at Google Cloud. Mr. Phil Venables, please.
Thank you. I'll be relatively brief because I think I'm joined by some really distinguished speakers today, so it'll be great for us to get going on the panel. But just let me spend a few minutes setting the scene a little bit. I'm going to talk about two things. First, security for AI, and then the main topic of the panel, AI for security. I think the two are quite interlinked for obvious reasons. First, on the security of AI, I think as we continue to deploy artificial intelligence in our organizations, there's three main risks we need to make sure that we're managing. First, this is a software lifecycle risk. AI is at its heart software, augmented by hardware, of course, but there's a whole complex software supply chain underpinning how we serve up AI. And this is all about making sure that we protect that software supply chain, protect the model weights, the model parameters, protect the fine-tuning that organizations do. And secondly, it's a set of data governance risks. A big part of the attacks potentially against AI are around corrupting training data, corrupting test data, corrupting the data that goes in and out of the models, whether it's model poisoning or other types of attacks. And so a big part of how we think about protecting and defending AI is making sure that we can track and manage the data lineage through how the data is managed in the process. And third, it's about the operational risk management of how you deploy AI, the input filters, the output filters, the guards and the circuit breakers that manage the operational risk of the deployment of AI into a business process, or perhaps in the processes that physically actuate operational technology or other environments. And it's important as we proceed with AI in all of our business and organizational use cases to think about those risks. So shifting now to kind of the topic of how do we think about the use of AI in security, I think the thing most of you will probably know is the use of AI in security is not new. So machine learning has been used quite a lot for the past 10, 15 years at Google. We use it to defend large parts of the platform. If any of you are Gmail users, I imagine lots of you are, you're defended every day by machine learning and AI that defends against malware, spam filtering. If you're a Chrome user, you're defended through safe browsing every single day, which is, again, an AI-based system to look to screen malicious websites and prevent them getting to your inbox. If you're in the Google Play Store for Android, that's an AI-based system. So AI is everywhere already defending us, but the opportunities from generative AI are particularly strong. When we think about some of the stuff we've been doing internally at Google, we're already using generative AI to augment detection and response operations, to enhance the productivity of security engineers, using it to identify anomalous activities. With our Virus Total team, we're already using our AI to actually decode malware that's submitted to Virus Total. We're using it to generate inputs for all of our security operations suite. We're using it to fuzz and find vulnerabilities in software. And then we're also using it to generate secure configurations for environments to make sure that we're pushing out secure configurations across all of our infrastructure and products. So it's already having dramatic effect. And then in terms of what we're not going to make this a product pitch, I promise, but we're also taking all of that internal capability and pushing this into products for the benefit of customers, as well as open sourcing a large amount of this work, again, for people to be able to use and integrate that in their environment. We've also had a lot of experience, so we took one of our foundation models, one of our foundation LLMs, and we've actually trained that on all of our threat intelligence data, including some of our latest now Mandiant threat intelligence data, plus all of our existing security practices and a lot of experience built up over many years to train a large language model called SecLM. And this is already used inside Google and in our customer environments, again, to take in logs, to take in infrastructure as code definitions, to take in software, to take in malware, to take in all sorts of information, to amplify, to 10x the productivity of the security operations teams, the security engineers. So this is just at the early stage, so we're really optimistic about the potential for generative AI to help us manage threats, to reduce the toil of what security teams have to do, and to amplify the talent, to get junior talent equipped to be more expert with AI assistance. And ultimately, while we think about the potential crisis of there not being enough cybersecurity workers in the world, a big potential is to 10x the productivity of the cybersecurity workforce we've already got. And a big part of the opportunity for generative AI is to do that. So we're just at the beginning of this. And I think, again, through some of the things we're doing in the community, whether it's our open source work or the recent announcement, we formed the Coalition for Secure AI with the other AI labs and tech companies and a number of other companies to, again, keep advancing how to think about security for AI as well as AI for security. So we're just at the beginning, and this is going to be a tremendous team effort for us all to get the best out of AI while safely and responsibly deploying it, but really using it to amplify, 10x the productivity and capability of our security teams so we can use AI for decisive defender's advantage versus our attackers. Attackers are going to use this stuff. They are using it. They're going to keep developing techniques on it. But ultimately, we believe that AI gives the defenders the advantage over the next few years. And we're just at the beginning. And this is a particularly exciting time. And it's great to be here talking about this. So with that, I'll hand back to my MC here. And we'll get on with the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Phil Venables, for the insightful sharing. And of course, please take your seat on the panel as we invite the panelists on stage. All right, let us invite our panelists for this afternoon right now, starting with James M. Allen, Executive Vice President, Booz Allen Hamilton. We also have Dorit Dorr, Chief Technology Officer, Checkpoint. Dr. Sanjay Bahl, Director General of CERT-In India. Let's also invite Fabio Fratucello, Field Chief Technology Officer, CrowdStrike. And finally, our moderator for this afternoon is Charles Ng, Executive Vice President, Ensign InfoSecurity. And now, without further ado, I'd like to hand the time over to Mr. Ng. Over to you.
Great. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the panel. We're going to discuss sort of AI use in sort of cyber operations. Probably a very interesting topic. We have a very strong panel. I think the MC has introduced all of them. So broadly, I think today for the contours of this discussion, there are a few things we want to explore. The first one really is, how is the world of cyber operations really changing? How is that place changing from the world of offense to the world of defense, even to how do you manage, patch your systems, the world of SOCs? How is that changing in the past few years? And I would love to know how the panelists feel about that. And the second question, I think Phil alluded to that, is how is the world of AI changing? Phil said there's tremendous opportunities in the sort of Gen AI space. It will be interesting to note, at least from the various panelists, is AI a fad? Are we seeing a sort of view of it that's not so sort of overly optimistic, or is there really a lot of opportunities that will emerge from there? And the third question we want to explore, of course, is what are the risks and sort of the opportunities and the limits, as these two worlds, sort of AI and operations, come together. Broadly in this discussion, I will have every panelist share for about 3 to 5 minutes at first. They will give their response or their views or any insights. And then subsequently along the way, I may ask some questions. And then we will then take, once everyone has shared, we will have question and answer. So I think there's a Slido. Feel free to ask your questions. I will see it here. And then we'll try to take as many questions as we can for today's discussion. Okay? So without further ado, I will introduce Fabio, from CrowdStrike. Feel free to share. You have 3 to 5 minutes.
Fantastic. Thanks, Charles.
Yep.
Probably starting, I like, Phil, the way you kind of emphasize machine learning, AI, and generative AI capabilities. So machine learning and AI has been around for quite some time, particularly from a defensive standpoint. If I just look at, inside a house, CrowdStrike has been built with those modules over 10 years ago. But when we start looking about generative AI, that's probably where we're seeing, a boom, an interest both from a defensive and from an offensive standpoint. Let's focus from a defensive perspective and, what are the likely avenues that, this capability can be used. And for me, there's two major components. One is really improving detection and response operations, detection and response capabilities. And the other one is around productivity. So when we think about the first one, we're really focusing on what the analyst, the SOC analyst experience is likely to be. We're thinking about having to defend to cyber threats on a regular basis, and effectively we break that down into getting the data into a platform. It's a tremendous effort most of the time, and so with generative AI capabilities, for example, by using semantic data link modeling and generative AI, you can have this capability to help translate the data, create a common format, and instead of having a person having to grind through that data plumbing process, you can reduce that time very quickly. Then we start thinking about detection. So what can we do, from a machine learning, from an AI, from a statistical modeling to improve the signal-to-noise ratio? How can we reduce the number of alerts and combine them into incidents that are more manageable to act and respond to? From a response perspective, we know times matter. And so what are the opportunities to increase velocity from a detection and response perspective? What are the manual activities that we can streamline to, for example, generative AI responsive workflow and have the machine to carry out some of those actions on the target systems? And probably the last one is really about, with all this information now together, what are the opportunities from a data mining, what are the opportunity from a behavioral perspective to get continuously insights and to use those insights to better manage the company, the texture posture, and ultimately the risks. This is probably the area from a detection and response perspective. Productivity, it's fairly simple conceptually, but it's really about, if an activity today takes 10 hours, what can we do to streamline that activity and have it done in 10 minutes? And probably to what Phil was saying early on, what also the opportunity to use generative AI to learn on the job. And, we're all, to some extent, fighting for cyber talents and, what we can do to alleviate as an industry that problem and use the human and the machine together to have the right workforce mix.
Thanks, Fabio. And I think that's a good sort of overview on a couple of areas. I just want to ask you a question because I know that you, prior to sort of CrowdStrike, you were from an FSI down under. What were some of the challenges, opportunities you saw when you were in a sort of FSI in terms of deploying some of these machine learning, AI, across sort of these couple of areas in detection, response, and productivity into sort of security for you in the FSI space?
Yeah, I think the challenge, and you're probably talking about a few years ago, generative AI was not as prominent as it is today. And if you think of generative AI, it's actually, from a technical standpoint, a fairly easy interface to understand, particularly when you think about natural language and being translated and deliver an outcome. So for us, back in the days, was more about AI and data science and data mining. And one of the challenge back in the day was really acquiring the right talent, because you know, even for deliver a business or a risk management or a security outcome, you need to have an upfront investment in terms of having, you know, the right folks with the right mathematics, statistical type of background, and you know, it's quite a grindy process to deliver the outcome from a data science perspective.
Great, thank you, Fabio. And I think the point on talent and the ability of talent to use AI well in cyber operations will be a key theme that we'll explore. Jim, I'm going to jump to you first.
Good.
Yep.
Great. Well, as Phil was giving his excellent keynote, I was thinking, well, what else is there to say? Right? It was such really, I think, a masterful description of the major issues and kind of where we are in this movie that's been going on for some time. I thought, though, as I listened, that there are maybe two things that I would emphasize that are inherent, and I think in what Phil was describing, and I think Fabio illustrates this to a great extent as well. The first thing is that the fundamentals don't change, right? Or at least they haven't changed. There's a model, there's a functional model for the attacker, the things that an attacker has to do in order to be successful, and so there's a physics to it, right? And you kind of it's well known, well rehearsed, and it really doesn't deviate very much in terms of what those major functions are. And I think we're all familiar with those. I think the same is true for defenders, right? There are functions that need to be performed. They're performed in sequence. There are processes and their procedures and their protocols, and there may be different management approaches, or it may be operationalized in different ways, but you know, functionally they're the same. And so the title for this panel, really around augmentation, I think is apt, right? Because those functions are being augmented, Phil described it, Fabio did as well, by machine learning and by artificial intelligence. So what's changed? What's changed, I think, to date is really increased efficiency, increased, I think, I'll say democratization on the attacker side, right? That there are more sophisticated capabilities that are more available to more attackers. The interface is easier. So we've already seen that, right? We've seen increases in terms of the attacks, the kinds of attacks, the numbers of actors, and the qualitative difference is, I think, mainly in terms of, say, the quality of spear phishing, right? So that's significant because spear phishing obviously has been a very successful technique for attackers, and it's very difficult for defenders because it depends on individual users to be able to recognize the spear phishing and take the appropriate action. So has it made a difference? Yes, it's made a difference, I think, in ways that really matter, but the model is the same, right? So it's a matter of enhancing and augmenting the model. But I think we're going to see something beyond that that we haven't seen yet. It reminds me, it's a little bit like global warming, right? It's like, you know, change sort of happens, and you deal with it, and you cope and you manage, and you adjust. But there's a tipping point in there somewhere, right? And when the tipping point comes, it's not just a matter of just a continuation. All of a sudden, there's a qualitative change that drives completely different outcomes, behaviors, consequences. We're not there yet with AI, but Chris Ahlberg actually touched on this yesterday in a very excellent keynote that he gave in another panel. And I would characterize it really in terms of three things that I'm concerned about: speed, scale, and stealth. Right? Speed, scale, and stealth. Right now, we manage all those things, and we think, okay, hey, that's normal, right? Things happen quickly. There's a lot of there's technical change. The actors are creative, and we're pretty much okay, right? And in fact, I think that's the mindset of most defenders. I would say is a combination of that we're, hey, yes, it's hard, and it's coming at us really fast, and we're coping, and we're still operating. So there's a little bit of complacency in that. But the other thing is that we're really slow. We're not fast in terms of the way we defend our networks. And in fact, I would say not only are we not fast, I would say that another, I'll say working assumption in terms of augmentation or enhancement is that the functional system that's in place to defend our infrastructures is adequate. My experience is that that's not the case, right? Overwhelmingly, it's not the case. That best practices, adequate architectures, the right kinds of operating procedures, training, adequate reinvestment. That's true more, I think, in segments, and I think the financial services industry, not all the financial services industry, but in the, I'll say the largest financial institutions, they do it really well, right? And so there are exceptions where I would say the defenders are doing it right, and this notion of augmentation and enhancement makes a lot of sense. What I often, I guess, observe is that many of the defenders are making an implicit assumption, and sometimes it's not just an implicit assumption, sometimes it's explicit, is that AI is going to save us, right? AI is kind of, it's almost magic, right? And so we're going to have, whether it's Google or CrowdStrike or, they're really smart people, and we're going to apply AI in ways that are going to make our lives easier, and it's going to be safer, right? We're going to be in a better place as defenders because of the power that AI brings. I think that's dangerous, and I think that's wrong. I think it is true selectively. Again, in the case of, say, the financial services industry, they're already very well defended. They have excellent architectures. They have excellent operating models, right? They do a lot of things right, and so it's going to be enhanced and augmented in ways that make those targets even harder. But if you're a network defender and you don't really have a good operating model, architecture, you don't have the right stuff, you're not using it in the right way, your workforce isn't trained properly, you don't have the right culture, AI is not going to fix any of those things. And so when we think about speed, scale, and stealth, what we haven't seen yet, and one of the reasons I think we haven't seen it is because the foundational models aren't quite there, but they're going to get there, is that the functional model on the attacker side, it really starts with what their objectives are, right? What are their goals? what do they need to accomplish? But very quickly after that, and really it's almost coincident with it, is reconnaissance, right? So target development, understanding what the attack surface looks like. That's hard. It takes a long time to do that. And AI changes that in a very big way. It revolutionizes the ability of attackers to perform the reconnaissance, identify the vulnerabilities, select the right capability to exploit that vulnerability, and execute at scale. And then once they're there, to use that access in ways that overwhelm the defenders, right? So that's sort of the dysfunctional or the dystopian future that that's on the other side of that equation, right? For the goodness that AI brings, the threats that it brings. Really, it's not a change in what happens, but it's in how it happens. So we go from, a couple of hurricanes a year, and if you're unlucky, you're in a bad place. But hey, we've had hurricanes for a long time, and then we have massive hurricanes, historically huge hurricanes, like separated by weeks, right, and more coming, right, and so it's like,
so Jim,
okay, the weather's.
Jim, I'm going to be cheeky here, right?
Yes, please.
Cheeky. And in Singapore, we don't really have hurricanes, so maybe that's. But I'm going to be cheeky here. So Phil made a statement just now, and it was a statement I wanted to explore with Phil, which is he said that with increasing use of AI and Gen AI, the defense has the advantage.
Yes.
You have a view here. How would you comment to that statement?
I think the defense has the advantage if it's competent. But I would say in the main, and this, I'll be cheeky too, I guess. I would say most defenders are not competent. I think they're living on the edge, and AI is not going to save you if you're not on your game. So, I think I think Phil's absolutely right, but it presumes a level of competence that I think is dangerous to presume.
Great, thank you, Jim. I think that's. And now we'll go to Dr. Sanjay. Sanjay, so Dr. Sanjay, you're on the defense side, you're on the incident response side. Yes. What would be your thoughts?
So let me put it this way. I think almost everything has been already spoken about. But having said that, today AI is the default technology being used by the attackers. So when you look at any attack today, there is some element of AI or the other which has been used in it. So to that point of yours, whether there's advantage for defenders or attackers, at this point in time, obviously it is the attackers who have the advantage, because I still feel that the maturity of AI defense is still growing. And there are still a lot of point products which are available. For example, there are more than 50 patents which have been filed in India by startups using LLMs for different point products. So whether, as Phil mentioned, whether it is for configuration of infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, etc., red teaming, insider threats, looking at API vulnerabilities, so each of them are point products. So they're not coming together as yet. And each of them will require a different maturity cycle to reach to a certain level where you can then start stitching everything together. The moment that happens, obviously, then the defenders will have the advantage. But that will take some time. Having said that, we are also seeing a lot of advantages which are coming from a productivity perspective. Now, for example, what we see when you're looking at net flow or network traffic, the metadata, etc., as James mentioned about the 3 S's, the analyst can start seeing what is happening from the flow perspective in terms of whether there is any exfiltration of data happening or not, whether there is any outbreak of malware which is happening or not. So this is where it is actually supporting. It is also supporting in terms of scanning the complete areas which you have identified or applications which you have identified, whether there are vulnerabilities or not, whether there are CVEs, etc., which can be exploited. So all those areas is where it is actually helping and the analyst to become much more productive and take appropriate actions. The challenge as we go forward is you will have to, as also mentioned, that you will have to start looking at detection and response. So detection will have to be done because of AI and 5G, etc. The detection will have to be done within 10 minutes. So are we in a position at this point in time from the defender side to detect within 10 minutes using AI models and maturities, etc.? And whether we are able to respond within under a minute. That is what will be required, because otherwise you will have disruptions and destruction of your infrastructure and applications and services. And so how are you going to be giving that service out to the large mass of citizens who are waiting for it? So I'm sure Google and others are doing these sort of things, and they've got that maturity and they've got the bright people. But I think what is required is democratization of that for the defenders across, so that you are then ahead of the attackers. Otherwise, it will be only in silos and it will not help.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay. Dr. Dio, I wanted to come to you and then go for it.
So I'd like to change the terminology from detection and response to prevention. I think we are all, not that everything has to be prevented at first time. There are many gray stuff. But at first, we have to take care about more prevention. And I'm going to try to say how AI helps us doing this. And I think this is very, very important even before we get to all the other places. So we're doing many years of prevention through AI by understanding malware and blocking it because we are confident about it. All this should continue and work as it was. With Gen AI, we could do more enrichment. We could be more sure of the verdict. We could combine verdicts with world knowledge, with organizational knowledge, and be even better at this prevention. But let's take a different scenario. You know, a few years back, there was the SolarWinds issue. And what happened with SolarWinds was that to the inside, it was like an open to all. But to the outside, it was like an IoT device. It should have never spoken to anybody else than home. And the problem was that everybody allowed it to speak to others. Now, I'm not coming as a complaint to the administrators that allow this. They have a very hard time. But with AI, what we should do is we should scrutinize our policies and not just do prevention by stopping known malware or unknown malware by identifying this on the fly with AI and all the enrichment that he spoke before. We should also structure the prevention in-house, and we already have autonomous policies for IoT devices where we learn the IoT behavior and we scrutinize the IoT to do only what it allows and what is it allowed to do. With SolarWinds, we should have scrutinized this as if it was an IoT device and not allow it to ever speak to anybody to the outside. And all this, when it moves from people to AI tools, the AI could, in certain cases, scrutinize the deployment, and in other cases, it could identify that it doesn't know to scrutiny very well, and then it will get use of detection, remediation, administrators, like reinforcement learning, et cetera, et cetera. So if I generalize this example, so first, I advocate for prevention, I advocate for autonomous actions, with the knowledge where is your limitation and not to take the autonomous to a place that you cannot decide. And more generally, I think where it should lead vendors is to understand the organizational, let's say, culture and appetite. What does it mean? If I take the same product deployed in multiple organizations, they deploy differently. Actually, this is one of the reasons that the administrators are there, is to kind of apply the organizational know-how on top of the product. But what if the products could better learn the organization through kind of an AI module and scrutinize the deployment, the policy to what the organization needs. And again, they won't know all, but they know that in certain cases, they should act firmly. In other cases, they should bring it to the admin to decide. So if we take the approach that we have to be more preventative and more scrutiny in our configuration, we could use the AI to do this in a very, very strong way, unlike ever before. And the third element I wanted to say on this is that we have an opportunity. Integration between products and between vendors was always complicated. And with AI that learns the APIs that we have all together and learns the cross relationship within products, we could also create better integrations that are testable all the time. So we could actually end up with a framework that is much stronger, like unifying different vendors and different engines and making much better educated decisions for the organizations, as well as being educated and when can we make the decision and when can't we make the decision. It's not that I'm advocating that it's always like, give me the keys to the kingdom and I do all the things. So I think that there is a bigger opportunity than just the operational and the detection and response part.
And Dr. Dorit, do you see an indication from users or from vendors moving down to that direction? AI in prevention, trying to learn the organization. Do you see any of those indicators?
So first, we do this, as I said, we do this with IoT today. Okay. And our users of IoT security are today enjoying autonomous policies. And yes, it's an easier case because they are willing to kind of, the IoT works all the time. They're understanding the simpler case and they are using it. In many cases, we do see them choose the autonomous policy that we give them. I think that it will be like a trust-building exercise. Over time, they would use it more and more. Like they use, we have policies for threat prevention where we let you set a profile that for certain severity and certain types of servers, we will block automatically. And they block automatically. Yes, they are not willing sometimes to go to the lower kind of confidence and to the lower severity, but at the high severity and the high confidence, they would block automatically. So it's just a matter of kind of grading. I think we have already enough examples to convince us this is doable. And commercially, I also see, now moving away from Checkpoint, just looking at the industry, I see, for example, startups that are trying to build let's call them add-ons for MSSPs that would provide learning of the organization that the MSSP is serving. Right now, MSSPs are, even though they give you a service, they give you the same kind of cookie cutter service because that's the economical way to do it. So I already seen startups that are targeting this MSSP market by learning the different behavior of different organizations and then by tuning the behavior of the MSSP to each organization differently. And think how much more like security this could bring and how much it could reduce human error and customer satisfaction if you do this. So it's not just by Checkpoint, it's industry.
Thank you, Dr. Dorit. I think that's very insightful. Phil, I'm going to come to you, and Fabio, I'm going to come to you. So Phil, Jim made a point. He said, in general, defenders are incompetent. Yet at the same time, you said that we are at the start where AI is going to transform cyber operations. Now, you are a user of AI both in terms of defense, and then I suppose Google also develops products with AI infused into it. From your perspective, and Fabio also, from your perspective, at what point would you say these are certain indicators that demonstrate to me that AI is truly transforming cyber operations? What are you seeing in your world, and what do you expect to see in 3 years' time? What are these indicators that you want to see to tell you that, look, we're overcoming the incompetence of defenders?
Well, there's a William Gibson quote that the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. Yeah. So this is happening today, and let me just give you a few examples to illustrate this. This is not kind of hypothesized future of what generative AI is going to do. I'll give you some examples just in the past 7 days of organizations we've worked with. So one organization, I kind of watched their use of some of our technology. And this is about, to Dorit's point about preventative. So an organization using our security large language model and using our general Gemini model are able to ingest the configuration of their environment and say, tell me where the configuration vulnerabilities are. And it identifies vulnerabilities, it generates the Terraform code to go fix it, and it fixes the environment. And that's not any special product. That's just a default part of the platform. Similarly, organizations, again, I've seen organizations do this, type in, generate me a secure configuration for this combination of products. Code's generated, it's deployed, it's analyzed, it's secure. That's transformational. Second, again, I just saw yesterday a customer, again, using the large context windows of some of our AIs, they're able to ingest vast amounts of logs. And again, these are relatively junior security analysts. So again, this is the democratization of talent. They're able to ingest all this information and then do conversational queries, which is to say, you know, this attack has happened, here's all the logs, here's the configuration, please explain to me how the attack happened, what I need to do to mitigate it, and what I need to do next. And the system answers that. Similarly, we've seen being able to decode malware in real time. So an organization sees some malware, they're able to stick it into Gemini and to SecLM, decodes it, analyzes it, tells them what to do next week. So this is like happening now. And one of the things we need to spend more time doing is taking those examples where companies are innovating this. And again, it's not experts innovating, it's sometimes junior security engineers, junior security operations people, and more and above, it's more managed security service providers that serve the organizations that barely have IT people, never mind security people, to ship that across their infrastructure. And so one of the things and I think collectively, and I'll talk to myself about this, is we need to amplify and make visible all those use cases, because ultimately there are going to be some transformational uses of generative AI, but the real transformation is the stacked benefits of all these little innovations everywhere that are just going to 10x the productivity and 10x the skill level of the teams we've got. I think that's going to be the transformation.
Yep. So the term I got from you was the democratization of talent, and I think that's a great point. Fabio, what's your view?
I completely agree. I think the technology is here, is available to everyone. The second point is really, do you have the right folks, do you have the right people with the knowledge to use it? And then the third point is really having the idea and to some extent socialize the idea to make sure the rest of us are aware that, it's possible and we can do it today, right now. We were at our user conference 3 weeks ago in Vegas, and we showcased generative AI parser to 6,000 attendees, and I can't repeat what were the comments, but the enthusiasm in realizing that an activity that today requires software engineers to spend days, week, month can be done in 5 minutes. We have built self-healing process into ad hoc tune LLM models, so the ability to transform the data, the ability to run tests on the data. If the tests fail, the ability to self-correct and go through the process over and over again until you achieve the outcome. And all of that is done by a computer at machine speed. So again, you're taking a month of work into a couple of minutes, and there is significant benefit, because if you think even from just an operations standpoint, now the organization can repurpose those security engineers to do something more valuable, protecting, improving protection, improving prevention, detection, response, governance, whatever is required by the organization to do. It's just, a wonderful way to streamline operation and gain productivity.
Yeah, Charles, if I may, I really like where this conversation has gone, and one of the reasons I like it is because it's so different from many of the panels that I've heard over the last several days. And the general theme is, the attackers have the advantage, right? The defenders, are dealing with this overwhelming problem, and the attackers only have to get lucky once, and we have to be right all the time, and it's just not possible, right? And I think what I'm hearing is that that's not true, right? Because the advantage that the defenders have, even before we bring in AI, is that it's your home turf, right? It's your infrastructure. You own it. You control it, right? And so the kinds of things that are being described here that, as I think Phil said, this is not some point in the future. This is now. You can do these things, but they're choices. They're choices that are made by corporate boards, by investors, by people who are responsible for defending their infrastructures. And my concern is that right now you can kind of live with it the way that it is. You know, it's not going to last, right? Because AI will make the problem so much harder, so much faster. The speed, scale, and stealth of what AI will enable requires the kinds of things that are being described. And if those aren't implemented in a systematic way, in a well-defended architecture, then you're going to be in trouble.
Jim, that's very insightful. I wanted to explore with you and Dr. Sanjay. And here's the question, right? What do nations or very large enterprises or enterprises in general have to do today? What choices do they have to make today, right, in order to sort of address some of the things that you raised? Sorry, Dr. Sanjay.
So, you see, what we are still talking about is from a technology perspective. So when James mentioned about the fundamentals still being there, so you have technology, people, and process.
Yep.
So while technology is becoming better and better, but the organizations will start deploying it. But what they have to understand is they have to start changing their processes. The processes, if they are not changed, and that culture doesn't change to make sure that the processes are in line with the changes in technology, there will be huge challenges and problems. Having said that, assuming that the technology has moved at that speed and processes have also moved at the same speed, now it comes to people. Now the challenge with people is that we've seen whenever there's some good technology available, they become complacent. The moment they are going to become complacent, it is assumed that the technology will take decisions, and they will start assuming that the decisions are correct. And that is when everything starts falling through. So you have to ensure that the processes are there, the people are still aware of what is happening, what sort of decision needs to be taken. At the end of the day, it has to be taken by them. They can't offload the risk to technology.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay. That's very present, process and people. Jim, you want to respond? What do we have to do today, to solve? What choices do we need to make as countries, as large enterprises?
Well, I think we know. In fact, I'll just use it's an overly broad term, but zero trust, right? So the fundamentals are the fundamentals. They work, and they're not ubiquitous, right? There are many best practices that we have today that, for a variety of reasons, different in every instance, but choices are made. It's too complicated. It's the administrative overhead is too much. It costs too much. I don't have the right tool or whatever, right? I mean, it's an endless list. But ransomware, just to take as a case in point, overwhelmingly, the statistic I think from Verizon is 80% of ransomware attacks are against known vulnerabilities that have patches, right? So that tells you something, right? That there are deficiencies, whether it's technical, whether it's process, whether it's training. But there's some deficiency that's preventing organizations from implementing best practices. They're known, right? And so I think AI, gives us another opportunity. We've had many, but it's a way that we can try to galvanize the community, really the broad community, that we have to have a sense of urgency in implementing the best practices, the fundamentals that are going to enable these innovations to do those transformational things that Phil described, because this won't work without that.
Fundamentals. We're down to the last 5 minutes, so maybe every speaker will just give a sort of short minute, give your final insights or your final views, and then we'll just round up the discussion. I'll start with Dr. Dorit.
I go back to prevention. I think we easily kind of let us go with detection and with 10 minutes to a few hours to weeks of response of things we know are problematic. And it's a great opportunity to change the terminology and to expect more from our environments, from the infrastructure, from the vendors, and from the whole ecosystem by doing much better kind of built-in security. Security by design, security by default, security by usage.
Yeah, changing the game from prevention. Thank you. Dr. Sanjay.
So I think AI holds great promise right from prevention to response, and there are great opportunities. I think we need to make sure that we understand the maturity of it as we go forward, so that it will actually start helping and making sure that the defenders are going to play the game rather than the attackers taking the advantage.
Thank you. Fabio.
Probably for me, it's a call of action, which is just embrace change. Like the technology is here, is getting used by the adversary, so it's time for us from a defensive standpoint to use it, and so seek out for technology, seek out for platforms that have great fundamentals using AI, generative AI, ML, because the technology is here to stay.
Thank you. Phil?
Yeah, I think just to echo everything we've talked about, it's important that organizations take on the technology, realize that this does enable a defensive advantage, and for the first time in a long time, we can turn the tables on attackers, move faster than them, impose cost on them, and this is going to be a tremendous opportunity. And in doing this, though, for all the security people in the audience, remember, while we can do a lot with AI for security, we've also got to spend equal amount of time thinking about the security of AI as all of our businesses and governments deploy AI into all the other applications. We need to make sure that that's not becoming an attack surface while we're using AI for all the existing attack surfaces.
And Phil, just a quick question. When we didn't explore this topic on the security of AI, do you see any promise in terms of the capabilities, any of the products, or whatever is emerging in the industry? Do you see any promise in that area?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of industry-wide work. For example, we've launched with the other tech companies and AI companies the Coalition for Secure AI, which everybody can join, and that's a big part of how we think about developing the frameworks to make sure that AI is safely, responsibly, and securely deployed into all of the business processes. And a big part of that is using AI to help manage the risks of AI. That's all quite complementary and effective.
Thank you, Phil. Jim, you have the last word.
I think at the end of the day, it's about a mindset and a culture, right? And an expectation that, as Phil and others have said, is we can beat these guys, right? That don't be defeatist. Don't expect to be penetrated. You can win, but you have to have an expectation, and you have to operationalize the best practices and the technologies in order to do it. But if you do it, you can win.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to thank the panel. I think we had a very good discussion today, talking about the opportunities of AI in cyber operations. I think we explored a little bit about how that moves into prevention, how that comes with opportunities for offense and defense, how it's a increased democratization across both sort of fields, how at the end of the day the key issues are still process, people, and how we sort of manage this into the future. I want to thank the panelists. I think it was a good discussion. We didn't have much time, but feel free to reach the panelists if you have to. Can we give them a round of applause, please?
Thank you, panelists. Your contributions have truly enriched our discussion and provided our audience with a deeper understanding of augmentation of cybersecurity operations using artificial intelligence. We are genuinely thankful for your time, dedication, and the wealth of knowledge you have shared with us. To our audience, thank you for your active participation and thoughtful questions. We hope that today's discussion has been informative and inspiring for you as well. Now, do note as well, this session will be available on demand on the SICW website, so feel free to revisit the session at your convenience. And of course, with this session, we end our SICW 2024 HLP sessions. My name once again is Wayne Chan. Thank you, have a good day, and we'll see you in 2025.